EDFU Temple
Visit to a temple built during the Greek period, not during the Egyptian period. So we made a jump in time. Monuments of Luxor was all in between 1200 and 1300 BC, 1400 BC. But here we are talking about 300 BC and 200 BC. Okay? How the Greeks made it to Egypt while we had no one will find any records in the history of Egypt or Greece that we had a fight. We never fight the Greeks and they never fight us. But how they came to rule Egypt? It's all because of Alexander the Great. This man who came to Egypt for only 3 months caused the occupation of Egypt for 300 years. 302, exactly. Alexander the Great was the son of a man called Philip I. Philip I was a Macedonian king who made a great empire in the east part of Europe, included many countries in the east part of Europe, and he built a great army and a great empire. This man had 2 sons. I'm making a very short-cut version of the story. He had 2 boys, Philip II and Alexander the Great, who was the younger boy. But his father, from day one, decided that Alexander the Great was going to be the king after him, because he noticed that Alexander the Great is more smart, more ambitious, and a stronger personality than his elder brother. That's why when the king Philip I passed away, Alexander the Great at the age of 18 or 19 ascended the throne and he became the king after his father. And he decided to add more troops to the army of his father because his target wasn't only to make an empire in Europe, but Alexander the Great wanted to have an empire in the whole world. He had this strong army, which was a combination of Turkish, Albanian, Macedonians, many nations on the east of Europe, and he started to march towards the east. Invaded the southern parts of Turkey, invaded with the current names, Lebanon, Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and by the borders of Persia, which is Iran currently. His army leaders advised them that Persians are having strong troops and a lot of troops in Egypt, behind us. If you want to attack Persia, you need to get rid of the troops of Persians in Egypt, otherwise they will surround us and they will definitely defeat us. So he changed the plans from invading Persia, turned around, moving towards Egypt to get rid of the Persians, not to fight Egyptians. When he came to Egypt, he knew very well that Egyptians are religious people. And he knows a lot about Egypt because, according to the most recent study, his mother was most probably an Egyptian lady. One of the wives of Philip I, his father was Egyptian, and most probably the mother of Alexander the Great was Egyptian. So he came and he knew that it will be very hard to fight Egyptians and Persians, so he must be a friend to Egyptians, and that's why he came with a lie that he is coming to defeat Persians to help Egyptians to get rid of the Persian occupation. After defeating the Persian troops in Egypt, he didn't decide to go because he was lying. He decided to visit one of the most important temples of ancient Egypt at this time in a small oasis called Siwa, and it was one of the temples of Amun-Ra. And it seems that he was very convincing when he spoke with the priests of the temple to coronate him as the king of Egypt and to give him an Egyptian name and to convince Egyptians that this is the new ruler of Egypt. Alexander the Great knows that Egyptians in the ancient times were believing that the king is not a human like us. Ancient Egyptians were believing that kings are descending from gods and goddesses. They are not humans like us. And every single Egyptian king had in one temple, on one of the interior walls of the temple, a scene inscribed on a wall to show the relativity between him and one of the gods or the goddess, or the relativity of his father or mother to one of the gods or the divine birth scene. But ancient Egyptian kings put this scene inside the temple, which is not accessible to all common people. Common people cannot visit the temples from inside in ancient Egypt. They can only walk around the temple from outside. But the kings of Egypt didn't need to show this lie, the divine birth, to every single Egyptian, because it's just believed by heart. Generations of Egyptians are believing that the king is descending from gods. So Alexander the Great wanted to do the same. He must coronate himself as the king, and he must prove to Egyptians that he is related to one of the gods of the gods. After making this lie in Siwa, and the Egyptians believed that he is the new king of Egypt, on his way back to Persia by the Mediterranean coast, he passed by a very small village called Rakotis, and he noticed that this location is very strategic, perfect location to establish a city under his name to commemorate himself. So he gave his orders to build a city called Alexandria with a design of a chessboard and a lot of other details. Later on we talk about this on our way to Alexandria. And then after giving orders to build Alexandria, this was the 12th week for him, week number 12, 3 months. Then he left Egypt, leaving some of his men behind to establish a city for him. Then he went to invade Persia, and he could defeat Persians. And by the borders of India, he wanted to invade India, but his army leaders advised him, man, listen, it's now 12 years we are outside our home country. Our kids, our infants grow up and we don't know how they look like. And we are so exhausted, we need to have a break. Let's get back to Macedonia to rearrange the army, to make it bigger army, because India is not an easy country or easy nation to invade. The man convinced, and it was very smart from him. Any smart leader cannot fight with demotivated army leaders. So he decided to move back to Macedonia. On the way back, exactly in Babylon, Iraq, he got a very strong fever, caused him to die at the age of 31, 32. 31, imagine. This man who made a massive empire was planning to invade the whole world, did everything when he was in the 20s. Still young to do this, but he was very smart and very strong personality. The fever caused him to die. His army leaders decided to hold the first dirty political conference on earth. This was in Babylon, Iraq, and they gathered together in a meeting and they agreed to divide his empire. Instead of maintaining the empire, they agreed to divide this empire into pieces. Every one army leader will take a piece. Egypt was given to a Greek man, his name is Ptolemy I, or Ptolemy son of Lagus, to become the ruler of it. Ptolemy I came to Egypt, get rid of all supporters of Alexander the Great, because their loyalty was for Alexander the Great. He started to hire more Greeks and to invite more Greeks to come to Egypt, and he decided to use Alexandria, the city built by Alexander the Great, to become the capital of Egypt. Then the Greeks started to rule Egypt. That was 332 BC. So Greeks started to rule without any wars, from Ptolemy I till Ptolemy XIII, and his sister Queen Cleopatra VII, the famous queen, when the Ptolemy XIII was the reason of the fight between Greeks and Romans, and then Romans defeated Greeks and started to rule Egypt. So neither Greeks nor Romans attacked Egyptians or fight Egyptians, but they took the land by politics. Clear so far?
Yeah.
During the 300 years of the Greek rule, Greeks respected a lot the ancient Egyptian mythology, religion, culture, and they gave Egyptians freedom to practice the ancient Egyptian language on a daily basis, and as well they left all temples open. But not just open, but they even used the sites of the damaged temples and the collapsed temples to build a temple with the Egyptian style, following the Egyptian mythology by Egyptian men, but it was built by orders from a Greek king, similar to the temple behind us. This location was a temple dates back to the Old Kingdom around 2800 BC, was collapsed somewhere around 1900 or 1800 BC. We don't know why it was collapsed. Then the Ptolemies, 300 BC, starting from Ptolemy II, gave orders to build a temple exactly on the same site, following the Egyptian religion, but again, it's just by orders from Greeks, and the cartouches are containing names of Greek kings. But the Greek kings had a problem. How they will prove to Egyptians that they are descending from gods while they are having different facial features than the rest of Egyptians. That's why Greeks decided to make a slight change. Instead of depicting the divine birth scene in one of the inner walls of the temple to be seen only by the priests of the nobles, they wanted to highlight this lie even to the common people. That's why Greeks decided to add an extra feature in the Egyptian temples, which we call it divine birth room, or mamize, divine birth room. In Karnak, you never saw something in front of the temple. Luxor, same thing. There was no chapels or shrines in front of the temple. But temples built during the Greek period, all of them, you'll find a mamize or a birth room right in front of the temple. He can use its walls to depict the divine birth scene, to show it even to every single common Egyptian, because he wasn't sure, he wasn't self-confident about how many Egyptians will believe this lie. How Egyptians were depicting divine birth scenes on the walls in different forms. Sometimes the king was showing his mother or his father in a complete romantic scene with one of the gods or the goddess. Some other times the king was showing himself as a baby or infant or a child, while one of the goddess is breastfeeding him. Some other times, maybe later on, when we get a tour without the kids, I'll tell you the third form. Let's now see one of the divine birth forms in this room. This is Ptolemy the 8th, Ptolemy number 8, showing himself with goddess Hathor, goddess of love, joy, music, and entertainment, showing the relativity between him and her. Let's have a look on this divine birth, and then we go to the temple together. Rocks. All of the temple is sandstone, and all of this room is sandstone as well. But why? The king decided to use some sandstone different color than the other color. Bear in mind that we did a lot of research and a lot of scanning for the rocks here to make rocks was made later to the lighter color rocks, or it was made. And the shot, very weird and very strange feature to find some sandstone rocks different color, because definitely the king wasn't lazy to get same color sandstone. If he got all of this sandstone, why he'll be lazy to get these few blocks? So this is a question with no answer. Second thing we want to see here is the divine birth of the king. You'll find the king here sitting on the lap of a goddess. Her name is goddess Hathor, while she's breastfeeding him as a baby. Here he's showing himself a little bit older. In fact, he's really old for breastfeeding, but she's still breastfeeding him. Over there, she's having him on a lap in a celebration or in a festival. In the lower scene there, you see the god is accompanying the king as a young boy. So the king, Ptolemy the 8th, wanted to repeat the scene to show the relativity of him to goddess Hathor to every single person comes to the room. The third topic here to tell is why the scenes are demolished. Why the scenes in the temple here are demolished.
Sorry?
Why it is demolished. Why the figures of the gods are demolished.
Oh, that's not a design.
Yeah. Why it is demolished. Why it was damaged by intention, not a design. Why it was damaged.
Oh, tension. Okay.
This is my question. Why it was demolished and what period it was demolished. In fact, the majority of the ancient Egyptian temples, you'll find the figures of the gods and the goddess, especially the gods and the goddess, are demolished. The reason that after we stopped using these temples for 100 or 200 years, and after having Christianity in Egypt for 100 or 200 years, the earliest Egyptian Christians, by mistake, thought that ancestors were pagan people following pagan gods. They worshipped the statues, they worshipped the figures of these gods and goddesses. So they wanted to get rid of the symbols of the pagan gods. But this was not a systemized job, and it wasn't a paid job. It was a big thing to happen. Very religious Christians feeling bad that Egypt, the Christian country, is still having symbols of pagan gods, so they used to gather themselves in groups from their own money, traveling to the different sites of Egypt, of the ancient temples, to demolish the figures. If the temple was buried, let's say we came to this room to demolish and we found one wall buried in sand and the other wall is still exposed, they will not bother themselves removing sand, because at the end we want to hide, we want to destroy the figure of the god, and it's already hidden under the sand. So they will just demolish what's exposed. That's why in some temples you find one wall demolished, the other wall is not. You find the upper part of the wall is demolished, but the lower part is not, because some parts of the temple was buried and it's the target at the end. And again, it wasn't a job. No one will ask you why you didn't remove the sand from here to demolish. It's just something from your heart, you do it by heart as a volunteering job. So no one will blame on you that you didn't demolish so well. That's why you'll notice that demolishing itself is different style. This almost was demolished by the same guy, but this is a different guy. Very clear, isn't it? Over there you find some parts of some figures. You find only the arms of the gods and the goddess are demolished, but the body is not, because it's covered in dress. So this person wanted to demolish the uncovered parts of the body, not the whole body. Some other people decided to demolish it whole. And some people made a mistake by demolishing the figure of a king. They thought by mistake that it was a figure of a god. So he just demolished, but later on, maybe after demolishing some, he noticed that this is a king wearing the button crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, so he shouldn't demolish. But he demolished the goddess, the two goddesses behind him. Clear? So we don't have documentation, we don't have records of these demolishes, but it's all happened between the 1st century AD and the 5th century AD. And it was repeated again, but on a very small scale after having Islam. In the 7th century AD, as well, some early Muslims thought by mistake about the pagan gods and they wanted to do the same. Clear? Because this, you'll see it in all temple seal visits.
We don't see that in Nile.
Cairo, you didn't see temples. There are no temples in Cairo. In the pyramids, there are no scenes. The pyramids of Giza, walls are all plain. Did you see any scenes in the walls of the pyramids? No. Only very few pyramids are having inscriptions on the walls, and all inscriptions are hieroglyphic texts, which is called the Holy Book of Ancient Egypt. We call it Book of the Dead. But no figures of gods or goddess to be demolished. This is the Ankh. This is the Ankh sign, A-N-K-H, or Ankh in ancient Egypt language is Ankh, and it's the symbol of life. Why Egyptians decided to choose this design to become the symbol of life, I think you know, because it's the same design of the Nile River. Look at the Egyptian map. Nile Delta in the north is like a circle, and then the Nile Valley is one line, and then the line in between Nile Delta and the Nile Valley is the border line between the two kingdoms before the unification, Upper and Lower Egypt. So it's just representing the Nile River and the unification line or the unification border, because again, Nile River for ancient Egyptians was the main source for the civilization, the main reason of the civilization. If there is no Nile River in Egypt, Egyptians would never build a civilization in ancient times. So
of Edfu Temple. Falcon. Going to enter the Edfu Temple now.
Sometimes wings were just, but those are the regular imagery that was existing on center rooftops to give the protection that is needed. The beauty in here, ladies and gentlemen, you see in the corner up there the
first lesson we had in the college, the first lecture of guiding, is not to book an entrance to the group. And I always wonder about these guides who are standing at the entrance to the group. Before you go for a free walk, because the temple is really busy and you need to see a lot here. So let me just show you a chair here before I go. Very nice feature. Very strange, I do not see it in any other temple in Egypt. Empty cartouches. Notice that? All cartouches in this wall are empty, having no names. And in fact, the reason of these empty cartouches is not 100% clear of us, but it's one of two theories. This wall was built by a king called Ptolemaic VI. Okay? If you love to read about weird families and weird people, read about Ptolemy V, Ptolemy VI, Ptolemy VII, and Cleopatra III, and Cleopatra IV. These are the most weird people. I read about them in the history. Ptolemy V, his wife killed him to marry his brother Ptolemy VI. She gave birth to Cleopatra III and Cleopatra IV. Cleopatra IV killed her sister. She was jealous of her. And then she killed her mother to marry the man who is her uncle. So the artist who made this wall, maybe he was confused. Who is ruling Egypt from Alexandria? Who is the king at the moment while I'm making these decorations? What name I have to put here? So this is a theory. Maybe because it was made in a period the king of Egypt wasn't clear, a family in a clash and everyone is killing the other. So the artist made the cartouches empty. This is 50%. The other 50% might be because Egyptians, yes, didn't mind the Greek rule, but of course some Egyptians were still rejecting this and they don't want a foreign rule. Even if the king could convince the majority that he is Egyptian, descending from Egyptian gods, but still some Egyptians will recognize that this man with the foreign features is not Egyptian. So maybe it is a revolutionary feature. The artist who made this wall refused to put a name in the cartouche on this wall. And this is the stronger opinion, the stronger theory, because you'll notice on these columns, we have here a very common symbol from ancient Egypt, represents Upper and Lower Egypt. The people of Upper and Lower Egypt, because people's symbol is this. This is a symbol of people. And this is the symbol of Lower Egypt, the symbol of Upper Egypt. And the whole section, or the whole word, says Nibnabuwi Tawi, which means all people of Upper and Lower Egypt obey. Obey to whom? Usually in old temples, you find here the name of the king. But here the cartouche is empty again. So maybe it is a revolutionary feature that the artist wanted to say all people of Upper and Lower Egypt obey to no one. Currently they obey to no one. So maybe it's because of the confusion. The artist didn't know the name of the ruler, and maybe it's just a revolutionary feature. The people of Upper Egypt objected the rule of the foreign rulers, which was accepted in North Egypt or Lower Egypt. Clear so far? My advice here, my friends, is to always look above, look around while walking in a temple. 98% of the temple's construction is in place as it was made in the ancient times. Right? The direction of your visit is this way. You will walk straight forward this way through this door till you reach to the sanctuary, which is the last point of the temple. Around the sanctuary from both sides, there are two pretty galleries I want you to see. A gallery to the right, which is an upstairs corridor, but it's all straight corridor. Then to the left-hand side, upstairs corridor, but spiral.
Aquí de cuadros rojos y negros.
பொம்மை மேலே எனக்கு ஒரு ஃபோட்டோ எடுத்து கொடு செல்லக்குட்டி.
Falcon. Look at the size, massive size of these pillars.
சாய்ங்கவா
ఇంకా కొంచెం ఇంటాక్ట్ again the picture is very clear. நல்ல வெல் இது அந்த ஃபால்கான் இங்கே பாருங்க பாலன்குயினை லிஃப்ட் பண்ணுற மாதிரி மெயின் ரைட்டிங் மெயின் ரைட்டிங் வந்தாச்சு look at the roof
பத்துக்கு வர சொன்னானே
950
40
950